Good morning. My name is Paco Zayas and I work at the Faculty of Education of the University of Cádiz. There I teach at the bachelor degree of primary school education. Our students have the opportunity to freely select whether to take part or not within this pilot itinerary that we announce as plurilingual itinerary. If they do it, if they choose to learn by means of a language other than Spanish, they accept the commitment of using all three foreign languages involved: English, French, and German, obviously with different level requirements for each one of them. Well, under this context, my subjects belong to this plurilingual itinerary, and they are offered in German, while other colleagues of mine do the same in their groups in English or in French. We'll talk of this later. Now, this contribution deals with a practical didactic proposal based on the so-called IFLA research, together with methodological principles derived from CLIL. This contribution has been structured in four main parts that relate to the context where this project takes place, the way or the extent to which we can be committed to IFLA and CLIL principles also at tertiary education, and then in the section of solutions we'll be dealing a bit more specifically about the way we adapt usual CLIL practice to the previously mentioned context, together with the IFLA didactic measures as an alternative teaching model, all of it to contribute to the development of professional competencies that foreign language teachers need. Finally, in the section of results, we'll try to review the threats and opportunities that these proposals could have when taken to a primary school context. Bilingual education has been growing in the last 2 decades and constitutes nowadays one of the strongest educative tendencies in Europe, most of all in countries or regions where conventional communicative foreign language teaching was not being efficient, just like in Andalusia or in most of Spanish regions. The question is, are teachers being properly trained to face this challenge? We think that foreign language teachers keep on being trained to preserve the same methodological principles they experienced as learners. That's to say, by learning about the communicative approach and getting techniques or didactic strategies to use them with somehow more actualized social contents, as well as by means of modern learning and communicative technologies. But authentic use of language keeps on being treated as a mere simulation of potential contexts, so that speakers do not have the authentic will or need to use the language, but in an optimal situation, they somehow lend themselves to play a role as if they really wanted or needed to use it. At the Faculty of Education of the University of Cádiz, we decided to try to modify this training itinerary with a still pilot new syllabus that puts authentic use of language right at the center of the equation. This project adopted the form of a so-called plurilingual itinerary. 3 foreign languages are involved: English, French, and German. They are all used for real communication within subjects related to foreign language didactics, and the itinerary flows into a natural conviction of CLIL and IESLA principles. Right. ISLA research, related originally to as instructed second language acquisition, is here referred to as IFLA, that is instructed foreign language acquisition. For even if foreign language situations are considered to be also part of actual ISLA research, we'd like to explicitly remark that being outside the natural language use environment, instruction constitutes the one and only scenario for authentic use. On the other side, the second acronym relates to content and language integrated learning, and as you surely know, it is not a usual didactic methodology at universities, where students are mostly supposed to domain the foreign language they learn through, at least as much as to wholly avoid the use of their commonly shared mother tongue. That is not the case at all for German at the Faculty of Education of my university, not at least among students of the bachelor degree for primary school. These students used to be, as you will see here, absolute beginners in German, so that we must take advantage of using a CLIL model and not other approaches to bilingual teaching. CLIL offers a possibility of combining the use of both languages, Spanish and German, in a very varied proportion of use, and anyway not necessarily within the same class, the same negotiation, or the same communicative sequence. We should bear in mind that primary and secondary bilingual schools, where CLIL is usual, divide their teaching itineraries in at least two parts, so that some contents or didactic objectives are attended in the foreign language and other ones are attended in the L1. How teachers do this, how they decide on which part of their classes rules in one or another language, that is a different question. Anyway, CLIL is a very flexible model, and as I have already said, it is not usual at tertiary education, where universities, depending on their internationalization policies, tend to adopt EMI formats, that is, English as a medium of instruction, or similar models, also with other foreign languages, but always with a unique one only language, which guarantees the international enrollment of students. Such models are obviously not committed, or not that much committed, with the duality of CLIL, the attention on linguistic competencies on the one side and the attention on other content-based competencies on the other, but both of them simultaneously. Most of our primary education bachelor students know about the possibility of taking part in this pilot itinerary after having enrolled the degree. They do not come extra to study with a CLIL methodology, but discover it along their first weeks at university, right when we let them know about the linguistic project. There they are persuaded to stay within this pilot itinerary as long as possible so that they can experience CLIL as learners, which is probably the best way to start developing a practical model for the future professional teaching activity. They are obviously scared that they might have to attend classes in German without having ever learned this language before. However, that's a perfect starting point to discover that communication does not depend that much on previous linguistic knowledge, but on willingness to access meaning and to connect it to intentions that are mostly inferred from mutually shared context and experience. The subject foreign language didactics is the first opportunity to do this. Students analyze foreign language teaching in Spanish on the virtual platform. Briefings and debates there relate to the IFLA model that takes place day by day in the classroom with German, right as if it was a German course for beginners. The presential side of the course, what happens in the classroom, constitutes an opportunity to review the previous assumed didactic principles of a foreign language teaching activity, so that it has to be an alternative. The German teacher does not speak a single word in Spanish, even if he knows that Spanish students don't speak German yet. And still everyone is from the very beginning somehow amazed that he or she is able to understand what's going on. There is not a text, a notebook, or a single paper with written instructions or with words to learn. Everything is just oral, and students are taken to make just relative brief but intense oral practices with each other, what makes them even a bit dizzy, for they doubt that they'll be able to remember verbal sequences the next class. There's no grammar explanation at all, so that students are always aware just of the functional objective of the sounds they exchange with each other, but have no idea of the meaning, syntactic role, or morphological characteristics of the words they must be using. Students are not allowed to see it, what is a rare novelty, most of all if it is to be used as a model for future work with children, for it is one of the very first disciplinary elements to be obeyed by children at school. They know they must keep regularly sitting and stand just eventually when required by the teacher, or to change places for different activity. But here, within this IFLA course for beginners, no one sits. Participants are asked to stand so that dialogues with other participants flow dynamically. The course finishes in January, at the end of the third semester, and students have learned at this point quite a lot of German in no more than some 50 hours. They are surprised that they can use it quite naturally for some domestic purposes, and most important, they considered the possibility of being acceptable or even good foreign language learners. If they had problems with English or French in their previous studies, this might not be their fault. It might well have been the method they were taught with. If they feel motivated enough, they know they'll have to acquire the language by finding opportunities to develop it through oral use, and just afterwards to learn about rules and conventions for writing. In this sense, they will be given the opportunity to carry on with authentic oral practices with native speakers for a whole amount of almost 240 hours along following semesters. They will have the chance to travel to a German-speaking country as Erasmus students for a whole year, and they will have to complete an internship at a bilingual school of German and Spanish, either in Spain or in Germany for one semester. In the side of didactics, at the end of this first acquisitive experience, they will have accepted that communicating in a foreign language does not require a previous knowledge of the words to be used, nor of rules to connect them in a sentence, but most of all, the disposition to try to infer what is happening around them or write the communicative intention of their interlocutors. They will have also accepted that, in a sense, acquiring means learning by doing. They will be somehow ready to work on the attitudes of their future pupils by giving them the opportunity to do things with this new tool that is German. When trying to evaluate this model, this pilot itinerary, there is a lot to be observed. Most of all, the extent to which it complies with the regular legislative requirements of any didactic training for primary school pre-service teachers. However, that is not our main worry here, for it would be to be assessed by a sort of quality commission whose task was precisely to check whether pre-service teachers get to learn specific administrative and legislative orientations to work within a definite territory. Our evaluation has to do, first of all, with threats upon this approach that do mostly come from the rigidity of the curriculum design on the one side, and from the hegemony of English over other foreign languages at bilingual education from the other. When checking the curriculum design for pre-service primary school teacher training in Andalusia, the most threatening element is probably the heavy weight given to theoretical learning within subjects that have to do with didactics, even if students have to spend almost a whole year for internships at schools. Probably, trainers tend to think that practical learning offered within such internships gives them the right to plainly inform or theoretical principles or fundamentals of each area. Together with this, the so-called optional subjects, where most of our clear teaching in German is, concentrates within the last 2 semesters, and that's too late to try them be enough as a foreign language experience. Not many students want to freely invest 1 or 2 more years afterwards to get linguistically competent in a German-speaking country. On the other side, a second and even more important threat is the one related to employability. Bilingual education is regulated in all regions of Spain as a bottom-up process, so that it is schools and not authorities that apply to become bilingual. Most in-service teachers may feel relatively competent in English, for it is the language they learned at school, even if they have to take a language upgrading course before. But they do not want to risk their jobs by enrolling a linguistic project where the foreign language is as different and theoretically difficult as German. Opportunities have also to do with social discourse related to pedagogical innovation on the one side and employability on the other side. Learning about foreign language didactics within a clear project of German implies itself, apart from the practical learning experience, also the chance to contact alternative organizational models of schools in German. Pre-service teachers that do their internships in German bilingual schools bring back with them a richer view of education as a whole, as well as an alternative way to lead a foreign language acquisition process, namely that where authentic use, as they will have tasted, plays the most important role. Our project constitutes, on the other side, also an opportunity to comply with European expectations on plurilingualism and pluriculturality, for languages involved are never taken apart from each other or from other participating foreign languages, but keep constantly in contact in a coordinated way as complementary parts of every single learning process. In the practical side of this promising opportunities section, it must be mentioned that German students may find their own professional way in three different scenarios: as primary school teachers for bilingual German schools, as soon as former bilingual schools in Andalusia start becoming plurilingual according to the new educative strategies in our region, or they can also implement this IFLA approach within primary school CLIL projects in English, much more extended in Andalusia and Spain nowadays, as long as they accredit a B2 level of domain in this language. And finally, they can also find an interesting professional path in Germany, where thousands of teachers will be needed in the next years, mostly as an opportunity to impulse their careers before using German to teach in plurilingual projects in Spain. Thank you very much for your kind attention.